Hey, this is Steve, and I've been wanting to make this video for a little while to update a lot of our friends and stuff about the church plant Charity and I are doing in Coatesville. And a lot of you know about this and know it's been kind of in the works for a while. And so now that we're getting close to our launch, we're officially launching Saturday, July 29th. I wanted to go back and kind of give you a little bit of an overview of how this came about and what happened and how we got to where we are now. And when Charity and I first got married 6 years ago, we moved out to Westchester. And while we were living here, we become familiar with an area of Pennsylvania called Coatesville. And a lot of you know we're both recovering drug addicts, and got saved and clean. And so for us, an area like Coatesville, which has a large drug problem and a large poverty problem, and just a lot of conflicts in that area, it was the last place in the world we had any interest in being around. And when we were out here, I really felt like God kind of put on my heart and called us that we were going to do something in Coatesville. Now, a lot of people ask, well, how do you sure that's God, or what made you think that was God? And I'll tell you honestly, the thing that probably cemented it the most in my mind that it was God calling us to this was it's the last place in the world we wanted to be. So it wasn't any area that we'd had chosen and said, hey, let's do something ministry-oriented or something church-oriented in Coatesville. So that really wasn't the case. At the time, through a lot of circumstances and things in our lives and stuff, it kind of became clear that the time wasn't then. God called us back to the Midwest. Being we both were recovering addicts in our past, we had a lot of wreckage in our family lives with our children and our families and everything due to our past addictions and stuff. And we really felt like that God was calling us to clean up some of them messes, mend as many relationships, put pieces of that back together as best we could now that we were saved and we had the power of Jesus in our life. So we went back to the Midwest, and we were there for 4 years, but the call and the idea of Coatesville never really left our minds. We just kind of knew that it was not at that time. Through a lot of things that happened back there, we've seen a lot of healing and restoration in a lot of our relationships with our children and family, and a lot of good things happened and went on there, but that calling and that urge for doing something in Coatesville never left. So last year, I really felt that it was starting to get to be time, and so we started, praying and talking to other people and kind of seeing how this looked and how this would come about. And so for us, we had a home in Missouri, and we had a pretty comfortable little life, and so we didn't know how the logistics of all of that would work out. And I really kind of felt like that we weren't going to just sell our house and gather up a bunch of money and then come and try to plant a church off that. I didn't really think that's the way God had that lined out. So I felt like God put it on my heart that we were supposed to give our property and stuff, give it up. And so what I felt like God put it on our heart to do was to give it to our children, to split it up between a few of our kids and kind of give them a firm foundation to start on, and to kind of just come and do this on faith. And that's not really an easy decision to get to. And I got to it, and then I told God, I was like, if you want us to give this house away, you're going to have to tell Charity on your own, because I'm not going to tell her that hey, we're giving the house away. I'm like, you're going to have to put that on her heart too. And over some time and some circumstances, we both came together on that, and we decided that that's what we were going to do. That if this church plant was going to happen, that we knew we needed God God to show up, and if God didn't show up, it wasn't going to happen. We didn't want any avenue where we could pull this off on our own power. We didn't want to deceive ourselves into doing something that we thought and then trying to make it look like God's will. You know, we kind of wanted to go all in. And so this year we started really getting, you know, and I talked to a lot of people, and I heard a lot of different ideas, and you know, I kind of always had to keep going back to prayer and God, how do you want this to look? How do you want this to come about? And you know, and go from there. You know, you think you tell a lot of your friends and church friends and stuff that, hey, we're going to go plant a church, and we really feel like this is what God called us to do, and that, you know, they would probably be encouraging, and some were, some weren't. You know, the one thing is that if you're looking for a couple to go plant a church, we're not who the church looks to for that. We're both, I mean, we're both hardcore drug addicts. You know, I had a $300 a day habit before I got saved, and I lived a life of crime and decadence and drugs, and, you know, so when people like us get clean, they're, you know, the church tends to want to push them off to a, hey, you know, well, why don't you go to this recovery group or get involved there, or hey, you can work in the parking lot, or, you know, there just isn't a lot of them that say, hey, you know, if God called you, God called you, you know. So I would probably say we didn't get as much encouragement as we'd hoped, and I'll get into that more later, but I kind of just want to get you into our thinking and how this happened. So in March, we gave the property, we split it between two of my boys and one of her boys, and, you know, they had plans and they were moving in, and one was going to build a little house on part of the property, and so, you know, they all had plans, and you know, this was kind of a blessing in their life, and it was also kind of a little bit of a restoration and a mending in some of the past relationships and situations and stuff. So, you know, we seen God's hand in that, and you know, we quit our jobs and we gathered up what little bit of money we had, and we had like $4,000, and we loaded up a U-Haul truck, and we took my pickup truck and put a camper shell on the back and put a mattress in it, and we said, yay, we're going to go start this church, and God's going to show up, and that's the way it's going to happen. And, you know, it was kind of exciting. It was a little bit scary. It was, you know, once the jobs are quit and the house is given away, there's kind of that, oh, what are we doing here? And, you know, but we trusted God and we believed in Him, and so we came to Pennsylvania, and we put all our stuff in storage, and we started living in the back of our pickup truck with my wife and me and our dog, and we would sleep in the back of the pickup truck with the mattress back there, and most nights we were staying at a Walmart parking lot, because believe it or not, it's kind of hard to find a place to park a pickup truck and sleep and rest and stuff. And we had some money left. You know, when we got here, we had, you know, probably $3,000, and we're living and eating and paying gas and stuff like this, and the money's kind of dwindling. But what's going on is we're trying to decide, do we rent a building to start church in and maybe live in the back of it, or do we rent a place to live and then trust God to show up and provide a building? And, you know, so there's a lot of logistics to be worked out in this, and we're going on this day by day, just trusting God. And what are you showing us today, God? How's the next step of this look? What's the next step? And when we got to Pennsylvania, a friend of ours that's involved in church planning invited us to this little retreat for a weekend where they were doing church planning seminars, and so we went to that. And it was good, and we got a lot of good information, and it was, you know, so, but then we come back and we're living in the truck. Now this is in March. I think we left March 18th or 19th, and so this is the end of March, and it's still cold out, and it's raining a lot, and we're camping in Walmart parking lot, and you know, there's days where it's kind of exciting, and there's days where it's very discouraging. Trust me, I remember one night we went into Walmart and bought a bunch of those hand warmers, and we put like six or eight of them under the blanket in the back of the truck to stay warm, and you know, it was, you know, like I said, some days it's a little discouraging, but you know, you gotta, you know, nobody said this was going to be easy, and you know, so we're just trusting in God, and we kind of had an idea that, you know, parking in Walmart parking lot it's hard to get any good rest. There's a lot of traffic. It's just, you just kind of feel out in the open, and so we started getting kind of the idea that we would call some churches, and lots of churches have big parking lots, and thought, hey, maybe they'd let us park the truck in their parking lot at night and sleep there. And so we called the first one, and they were like, yeah, you know, they kind of gave us the soft blow off. They're like, well, we're having a yard sale this coming weekend, and we really just don't think having somebody park in our parking lot would work for us. And so, you know, that was a little discouraging, because, you know, when I got saved, I kind of thought that, hey, yay, we're all Christians, we're on the same team now, and we're working together, and we're building God's kingdom, and we're going to, you know, reach the world for Jesus. And, you know, regretfully, I have to say that hasn't always been my experience, but it is what it is, and there's more on that later. But a couple days later, we were up driving around the Coatesville area looking for places and looking at buildings that would maybe work for church and maybe we could stay in, maybe, you know, just trying to sort all that out. And there was an old church that I was by our house when we lived out here before, and I was kind of like, you know, why don't you call them, because they were kind of out in the country, and I thought, and just see if maybe we can park in their parking lot at night. And so my charity called them, and they were like, absolutely, you're more than welcome to stay in our parking lot, stay there as long as you need to, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, but I also know a guy that owns some property, some rental property right down the road, and I know he has a place that's for rent. Give me your name and number, and I'll forward it to him, and just see what happens. So we were like, okay, and we gave him the information, and then that night we stayed in the back of the truck. And of course, there was a big rainstorm, and it was cold, and the camper shell started leaking, so our mattress got all wet, so the mattress was soaked, it was cold, it was rainy, so we ended up sleeping in the car, which was even less comfortable, but it was drier. So, and you know, truthfully, the next morning we were pretty discouraged, and you know, we were, you know, hitting churches here and there on Sunday to go to service. And so the next day this guy called, and it was this landlord, and we came down and looked at the place, and it was suited our needs. And so we're thinking, you know, well, maybe God's wanting us to rent a place, and then he'll find us a church building, you know, or a building where we can do church services. And you know, the thing of it is that the idea behind all this is that we really wanted a building where we could be there every day. You know, the vision and that we felt God put on us is that we wanted a church where people could contact and bump into and be involved in the church every day. You know, in a lot of poverty and drug-ridden areas and stuff like this, an hour of church a week just isn't going to do it for people. It's like they're running around on fire, and then they run in Sunday morning and get a dropper of water put on, and it's just not enough. A lot of these people need to be able to you know, when life is blowing up and falling apart, they need to know there's somebody at the church, and we can go to the church, and there's a Bible study or a recovery group or some youth group, or there's something going on, there's people at the church, and that's the light, the beacon in the community, that whenever you need it, the church is available. And that was a lot of the vision for me, because I see so many churches, they got these big, magnificent buildings and thousands of square feet, and then it's like the lights are only on a couple hours a week, and it's like, you know, it's almost like the church is holding the people at bay. You can come now, but don't come then, and it's just, it don't seem to be the draw or the availability that people really need. So anyway, that was our vision. So, you know, we're trying to figure out how to make that happen. So we meet this landlord, we look at the place, and it's within the budget that we kind of set for ourselves, and we decide, well, let's see about this place. So we talked to the guy, and we had the money for the deposit, we had the money for the first month's rent, but what he told us is he wanted first month, deposit, and last month, and we didn't have that much money. And so, you know, me, I'm a little bit more manly and prideful than my wife, and I was like, okay, well, we'll get back to you and let you know. And Charity wasn't having any of that. She's like, hold on a minute. She's like, if we have the first month rent and the deposit, can you work with us on the last month? And you know, we met this guy through the preacher at the church that let us stay, and so we knew he was a Christian, and he knew we were Christians, and he's like, you know, he wanted to know a little bit about us, and he's like, yeah, you know, I think I can work with that. So what a blessing. You know, we found a place, we weren't sleeping in the truck anymore, and we kind of had a little base of operation in place where we felt like we could be and start. Now, mind you, we didn't have jobs, and all the money that we had went into getting this place. And so we're like kind of sweating that a little bit. And the guy's like, well, but you know, I got some other rental properties, and if you're looking for work, he's like, I could give you some work. You could work on some of my other properties and stuff. And so, you know, it was just a couple big blessings right there in a row that kind of enabled us to kind of even, you know, pause for a second and kind of get our wits about us. And he was a super nice guy, and his wife was super nice, and they were just good, solid Christian people. So that was great. I was able to start doing a little work, and we got moved in, got our stuff out of storage, and we weren't sleeping in the truck, so that was great. And the guy invited us to his church, and he went to a Mennonite church. I'd never been to a Mennonite church. My wife had never been to a Mennonite church. And so we were kind of like, yeah, maybe we'll check it out. And we had made a commitment to go to a friend of ours church, and we went to that. And then next week we're like, let's go check out this guy's church. And so we went to this Mennonite church. And I have to tell you that it was a little more old school than our normal church taste. We're kind of, you know, a little more louder music and a little more heavy praise and worship. And, you know, there was a lot of the ladies there had little things on their head, and, you know, there wasn't a bunch of tattooed up people and stuff. So, you know, so it was a little bit of a different environment than we were used to. But, you know, we're open-minded, and we went, and the people were super friendly, and I've had a lot of church experiences that weren't like that, and I had a lot of church. I had a church in Springfield, Missouri that we went to for 6 months, and somebody spoke to us one time. You know, we went there for 6 months, and you know, nobody would speak to us. And so, you know, we've had some real sketchy church experiences. So everybody was friendly and real nice. And then one of the strangest things happened that has never happened to me since I've been saved, and I've been saved for 9.5 years. And after church, we met some people, and this couple said, hey, would you like to come over to our house for lunch? Now, in all of our church experiences, nobody's ever invited us to their house or to their house for lunch after church. So we're like, yeah, we got to go check this out. And so we went, and there was some other church people there, and we spent a couple hours and got to know them and talked to them, and they asked about us, and we told them what we were doing and all this. So it was really nice. It was a really nice church experience. And so we're like, man, that was really nice to go to a church that's inviting and where the people are welcoming and, you know, don't automatically just judge you. And so we're like, we got to go back to that church again. We made a commitment the next weekend, which was Easter, to go to a buddy of ours church farther up north. And he's a friend from when we lived out here before. He was an associate pastor at the old church we used to go to, and now he planted a church. And so, you know, we really kind of wanted to go up there for Easter, and so we did, and it was good. And so we got back, and we're, you know, I'm working, and Charity's getting the house set up, and we're looking for buildings for this church, and we don't have any money for a building, but we're still looking. We're meeting other pastors and trying to see how this all was going to take form and shape. And so then the following week after Easter, we decided we're going to go back to this Mennonite church. And that was April 23rd. And it was a normal Sunday morning. And we're getting up, we get ready, we take off driving. We're about 5 miles down the road, and my wife got a text message, and it was like a nuclear bomb dropped on our life. I seen my wife read that message, and then I heard a wail and a sound come out of my wife that you never want to hear come out of anybody you love. And I didn't instantly know what it was, but I knew it was bad, and I knew to pray. And I just started praying, and my wife read me the message, and it said that her oldest son, my stepson, he was 21, his name's Tyler, had been in a terrible accident, and that he wasn't expected to survive. And so instantly, the world that we're in is that's just gone. And we're in a whole new place, and instantly everything is just, it's just chaos. So she's on the phone, and she tries to call her dad, who he'd already got in a plane and was on the way to Springfield, Missouri, where the accident happened. She got a hold of the hospital, and she talked to the doctor, and the doctor said, we're going to try to keep your child alive long enough for you to get here. And the last thing I hear my wife say to them is, you keep my baby alive until I get there. And time just, everything moved in this weird way, in this chaos. And the first thing I knew is I had to get my wife to the airport. And we called our friends, the landlords that rented us the place at church, and told them that we had to go, and to see if they could check in and take care of our dog, lock up the house, whatever, keep an eye on the place. And my wife grabbed some clothes, and we hadn't decided what I was doing yet. And so we got to the airport and decided that I was going to fly out with her and just trust everything here to them. And we got plane tickets, family members, all this stuff's going on, and my wife, and we get to the gate, we have boarding passes, and we're waiting on the plane. They start to board the plane. We get on to board the plane, and her mother had bought tickets for us to get back on, and we got to the gate to board, and they said these boarding passes are no good, that the credit card company had refunded the money and canceled the tickets. So we're standing there at the gate. The plane's leaving in less than 10 minutes, and we have to be on this plane. So I start pulling out every bank card we have, and we have overdraft protection on everything. So we should have been able, and there was enough money here and there that we should have been able to scrape together these tickets. And so the plane lady swipes this card. She said this card won't work, and she said swipes that card and said that card won't work. And so my wife had been on a couple mission trips to Madagascar, so she had some miles saved up, and we're like, well, does she have enough miles to get on this flight? And we messed around with it, added a few dollars, and got her a plane ticket. So she's on a plane ticket. She has a plane ticket, and I told her, I'm like, get on the plane, get to Missouri. I'll go back, get the car, get some clothes, get the dog, and I'll head out. So, my wife's on the plane alone, the worst possible day of her life. This was her firstborn son, who was her heart, who she loved. Every time I ever seen her see this kid, she just instantly just grabbed onto him and just squoze his neck. It was just the purest, truest, natural, just love attraction thing that, she just automatically gravitated to showing this kid love. And he loved her. They even looked alike, and they're the same size, and it's just, man, it was just always like that. And so my wife's in the middle of the worst day of her life on a plane back to Missouri. I'm going to get in a car, snatch up my dog, and drive 15 and a half hours. And so my wife, and meanwhile, her dad is landing in Missouri. A friend of ours from back there at the lake area was headed to the hospital. My wife has a friend that she goes on mission trips with, and she's a doctor in St. Louis, and so she's in her car heading to Springfield, and all this convergence is going on. And this whole time, it's like the worst. We expected this not to be easy. We expected the devil to try to roadblock us and deter us to, our fear was the devil's going to try to get us high, or the devil's going to try to affect our marriage, or, we expected resistance and we expected some hardship, but we never in a million years seen this coming. So we're right in the middle of it, and there's no time for anything. But yet I'm fixing to get a bunch of time, and I'm fixing to get 15 hours of driving. And so my wife gets to Missouri, she gets to the hospital, she kind of is updating me on the phone, and I'm driving. So I got this 15 hours, and I've never prayed for 15 hours straight before this, but I'm praying today, and I'm praying hard, and I believe God can do anything. To the core of my being, the very core of me believes God can do anything. I believe He can heal. I believe He can raise the dead. I believe all of that. I have no limits on what I believe God can do. And so I start this journey, and I'm praying, and I'm, I just don't know what's going on. And it's kind of funny, and funny ain't the word, but for me, it was kind of strange what God wanted to talk about. And for me, I've always, I lived a hard life, and I'm kind of a hard dude, and, I'm pretty direct, and, maybe even some say a little aggressive, and so I can come off mean. Maybe I am a little mean, I don't know, but I come off that way. And, one of the things that God kept telling me over, and what I really felt like He was trying to get through to me, He's like, Steve, if you're going to do something for the kingdom, and you're going to share the gospel with people, it don't matter if you're right, and it don't matter if you're telling them the truth. If you can't be kind, and you can't be nice to people, and show love, they can't hear you. It don't matter how right you are if they can't hear you. And I was really like, God, this really isn't what I want to be talking about right now. And I was having kind of a hard time putting it together, because I'm praying, God, please save Tyler, and please, don't let this happen to my wife, and and so, but kind of how that came together for me is that when I started seeing God's hand in how all this, how the situation was being prepared, and you know, 4 years ago when we went back to Missouri, we went back there specifically to fix these relationships with these kids, and Tyler came and lived with us, and I mean, Charity and Tyler got this time together and really got to renew their bond and fix their relationship, and they just had all these experiences together and stuff. But yet, for me, Tyler living with us, you know, I was kind of always, Mama couldn't be hard on the boy, so that was kind of my job, and I kind of had to be the authoritarian and kind of try to keep him walking the chalk and doing right, and you know, go to church, and you know, don't smoke and all this. So I was always on the boy, and I was always being that in his life, and I kind of think that that's how God put the picture together for me, is that you know, that was a classic case of, I was so busy being right and so busy telling him, even though what I was telling him was true, I was so busy telling him true that I wasn't doing it in a way that he could hear me, you know. And I guess, you know, the weight of that settling on me while all this was going on, and not knowing how this was all going, you know, I mean, I believed every minute of that way that God could save that kid. You know, I believed that even if he died, God could bring him back. And it's not looking good back in Missouri, and I'm driving and I'm driving and I'm driving, and my wife says, you have to get here, you have to get here. And they're wanting to, you know, he fell 5 stories and landed on his face. He broke his back, broke his ankle, his whole face was busted, and I mean, you know, I could even see a miracle. There was a miracle in that, and that is if he'd landed on his head and broke his neck, he would have died instantly. But landed on his face, it broke his face enough that his brain was actually able to swell, and the pressure didn't kill him right away. So, you know, my wife's there, and my wife's heart is broken 10 million pieces, and she's saying, you got to get here, and they're wanting to turn him off and take him off the ventilator, and she's saying, you are not turning off my child until my husband gets here, and we are going to put our hands on this child, and we are going to pray, and there is nothing going to stop that from happening. So I'm driving and I'm believing and I'm praying, and I finally get there, and one of the other huge blessings of this is that when my wife landed in Springfield, Missouri, our old pastor from the church we went to at the lake was already there. He got the news, and he had had a lot of contact with Tyler, and he'd counseled with him, and you know, when Tyler come to live with us, we're like, you need to talk to Jay, and you know, and so, you know, this guy, he had a relationship with Tyler. They'd get together and they'd drink coffee and they'd talk and stuff, and so this man knew this child, and when he picked my wife up from the airport, he was able to look her in the eye and say, you know, because we didn't know, was Tyler saved? Was he saved for sure? Was he still saved? You know, I mean, what, you know, there's just that doubt in there. And he was able to look my wife in the eye and say, I had the conversation with this child, and I know that he was saved. And that, when the prospect of losing a child and not knowing what eternity holds for that child, that's a weight that is beyond even my comprehension right now. So that, for me, that was able to give her some peace. I got there, and he tried to prepare me, and I mean, I'm blazing through the hospital to get to where this child and my wife is, and he's trying to prepare me. He's like, Steve, I want to tell you, he's like, you don't know what you're walking into, and I'm not hearing any of that, because I'm still believing, and I'm believing hard. I'm believing harder than I've ever believed anything in my life, and I believe God can do this. And so I get there, and I see my wife, and you know, I see her face, and I've heard the news that it's not good, and I walk in, and I almost can't recognize this child, but I know it's this child. And you know, we go in, and I grab that boy's hand, and I grab my wife's hand, and we start praying for this child. And that pastor stands outside that door, and he guards that room, that you know, nobody's going to interfere, nobody's going to stand in between, you know. And we prayed for that kid with all of our heart and all of our belief. And you know, I remember thinking that I'm sitting there and I'm holding this kid's hand, and I'm praying, and his hand feels to me. I hold his mother's hand all the time. I hold his mother's hand a lot while she's sleeping. It's just the way we sleep. Her hand's where I hold her hand a lot. And I'm holding this boy's hand, and they feel exactly the same to me. I mean, they're the same. If my eyes weren't open, I couldn't tell one's hand from another. And so, you know, I mean, 1,000 things are going on with me, and you know, we're praying for this child, and God isn't healing this child, and that settles on me. And it settles on me that we're going to bury this child, and that our life has forever changed in some ways, and I don't know what those ways are. And I know my wife is never going to be the same, and I know that she's just she's broken in a million pieces. You know, it's almost like I can see her as a puddle, you know, because she just melts in this agony of what's coming. And you know, so 20 minutes after I got there and we prayed for this child, they pronounced him dead. And you know, they allow everybody to come in and say goodbye, and we gather around and we pray for this kid again, and they undo the ventilator, and his mother is laying on his chest, and she is just holding on to this child for however more minutes, whatever more she has left. She just is not letting go of this. And we're watching the numbers come down, and you know, and then his heart picks back up a little bit, and is this the miracle? Is this, you know, and you know, so a few minutes later, this child died, and we're left in the middle of this whole thing that we don't know what it is. But the one thing that I guess that I felt the whole time is that, man, I felt God there, and I felt God putting pieces together. And you know, it was funny because right before we left Missouri, we went over to the boy's house, and you know, Mama's, you be good, Tyler, don't do this and that, you know, he told his mom, he's like, don't worry, Mom, Jesus is my homie. And you know, and then, you know, it was funny, the last post he did on Facebook was that video of why I love Jesus but hate religion. And you know, and I mean, I just started seeing all these little pieces God put together. And you know, we found out what happened that night, and you know, it's a long story, and it's tragic and it's heartbreaking, but the last word out of the kid's mouth was Jesus. And you know, so we're at this point where we're grabbing onto every little solid thing that we can hang on to at this moment, because life is moving and shifting in very disheartening ways and unsettling ways. And now we shift to, you know, this child, and we have to bury this child. And Charity's family is in the funeral home business, and her dad has funeral homes, and her dad I mean, her dad was the first person to hear about this, and he got in, hit the airport, got in his plane, and flew to Springfield. And I mean, he was there. And Charity and her dad have all this past issues and situations in their relationship and stuff, but everybody was on this for Tyler. Everybody was together on this. And you know, her dad is just as heartbroken. This child lived with her dad for years, and so this guy had invested and poured into this child, and you know, so his heart's breaking, her heart's breaking. We're you know, my heart's breaking not only for my child but for my wife and what my wife is going through, and it's just complete madness for a bit. And her dad makes the arrangements to get Tyler back to Iowa, where Charity's family's from, and we move into this week of planning a funeral. And you know, I mean, her dad went far and above and beyond, and you know, he brought in one of the nation's best reconstructive guys to put this kid's face back together so that we could have an open casket funeral. And I mean, they, you know, and all that entailed. And you know, so through big tragedy and heartbreak, you know, things between them, they were able to work together and focus just on this child and the love for this child, and you know, the beauty that, you know, thank God he was saved. And so you know, I'm drifting off on this Tyler thing, and it's hard not to, because it's such a cataclysmic event in this church plant. You know, I mean, we're talking about we're a month in, and you know, how do you go back? First of all, you know, how do you go on? How do you go back? How do you, you know, we're both recovering drug addicts. How do you stay clean? How do you live this new life, let alone go plant a church, you know? And I think we were back for, you know, I don't know, a week and a half, and then, you know, we buried this child, and we came back to Pennsylvania. And you know, I seen how God put the pieces in place to protect us beforehand. If we hadn't found this house and met these people and gone to this wonderful church, and we wouldn't have been able to come back and live in the back of a pickup truck and grieve and try to plant a church. And you know, it's funny, we've lived in several places, and we know people from churches, and you know, these people at this Mennonite church had met us one time before this happened, and the number of people that called and wrote condolences and sent cards and sent flowers. And we came home, there was cards and notes on the door and all this stuff, this outpouring of love from people that had met us one time. You know, that is the power of how the church works and intercedes and stands in the gap, and you know, takes care of people. And you know, there's, you know, we'd hear from these people in this church or that church, but you know, nowhere, you know, one of our pastors from Pennsylvania came out for the funeral, and the pastor that was there at the hospital drove all the way up to Iowa. And so I mean, we had tons of people that supported and surrounded us, but yet it was, you know, that little Mennonite church, I mean, they showed up. And you know, we will forever in our hearts be grateful for that, because you know, to come back here and try to reset and get our feet back on solid ground, and what's that look like, and how do we move on from here? And you know, we got to go on, you know, we got to pursue what God put on our heart. I mean, you know, after God has been this faithful to us, you know, I mean, there was never a moment in this we were amazed that we didn't get high, but we were more amazed that we didn't want to get high. You know, the last thing in the world that the last thing we wanted to do was dishonor so much what God did for us and for this child. And you know, we were grateful for the time we had with this child, that last 4 years, and the memories and all of that, and we were grateful for all that. And so while getting high wasn't the problem, and still hasn't been, but I mean, there's pain is part of a daily part of our life now. You know, every day since that child has died, my wife has bawled and cried and ached and hurt in whole new levels and whole new ways. And you know, and then we get up and do the next piece, the next step in front of this, and you know, we've seen God show up and provide everything we needed. And you know, it's been amazing. And you know, I guess for me the biggest part of this is that there's a tendency to think that if you love Jesus and you believe in Jesus and you're going to follow Jesus and you're trying to do stuff for the kingdom, that nothing bad's going to happen, or that, you know, you got this, oh, if you're doing God's will, you're going to get blessed with a Cadillac, a Rolls Royce, and a helicopter, or whatever, you know. And I mean, you know, and you know, and that's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, in this world you are going to have tribulations, you're going to have trials, but fear not, because I have overcome the world. And that's the real gospel to me, is that we are building the kingdom of God for the eternity, not just for what we get out of it in this life, or for the easy road, or the cushy ride, or you know, I think about the Apostle Paul and all that he went through. And you know, he's like, you know, basically, I consider all these afflictions nothing but a momentary thing. And when you weigh that against the eternity with God, eternity in heaven, you know, how much, you know, yeah, this sucks. This sucks bad. But at the same time, it is beautiful and it is magnificent to see God's hand and God's face and God's plan. Even when it hurts, it's still amazing and beautiful and better than anything I had before I got saved. I had, you know, I had some stuff and I had some things and, you know, whatever, you know, but this is real and this is real life and this is the real gospel. And sometimes, man, you get knocked down. And you may even get kicked some while you're down. And there ain't no guarantee that you may get knocked down again. But God is faithful, and God has been with us every step of the way. And while we're in this, God has felt and appeared and been realer to us than ever before. And that even in this heartache and this tragedy and trying to get this church plant together, and amazing things have happened with that since we've been back. You know, I'm doing this video and it's like, I don't know, July 7th or 8th or whatever, but you know, we got a building 2 days a week. It isn't our vision yet of every day, but it's a step, and we have it Tuesday and we have it Saturday night, and we're going to start Saturday night services July 29th. And you know, some people have come together and support and said, hey, let us help you do this and let's be a part of this. And we got a board put together, and you know, everything's coming together for this. And it's right in the downtown of Coatesville. I mean, it's the hood, you know. And you know, there's people go around during the day and poop on the back of the building, and there's winos sitting out front drinking and smoking. And you know, so I mean, it's where church needs to be, in this kind of place. You know, I mean, people are going to see this church. People are going to bump into this church. People, you know, it's there. It's not on some safe campus on the edge of town with, you know, 20 acres of rolling yards, and you know, protected from the sadness and the darkness and the drugs and the poverty of the city. It's there. And so, you know, we're seeing this, and we're seeing God's faithfulness, and we know something's going to happen. But you know, we aren't trying to define what has to happen, or what is our benchmark of success. We decided this before we ever even came out here to start this church. You know, I call it the guerrilla church plant, because it's like guerrilla warfare. We're not doing this by some church. You know, no church sent us out, or no church supported us. You know, we've had a couple people say they pray for us, and, you know, that's great. But, you know, nobody came beside us to help this happen. We're doing this like guerrilla fighters. You know, it's us and God, and, you know, whoever He puts in our path. And, you know, so we're just trying to set the benchmark that whatever God's plan for this church is, that's what our benchmark of success is. If we do this for a year and one person gets saved, it was worth every bit of it. It was worth giving our house away. It was worth sleeping in the back of a cold truck. It was worth, you know, not having the sense of security that we used to have, or whatever. You know, so we're not defining this by any terms other than what God says. If He says, man, this was a success, you did what I sent you here to do, then that's how we're measuring our success. You know, I see reports of the fastest growing church in the U.S., or this church is making an impact in this, and you know, all these benchmarks. And, you know, God's world and God's kingdom is so spatial, and we can't even see all of it, yet we want to try to define success and failure of things, and I can't do that. You know, we may even just be planting seeds for a harvest later, or we may harvest seeds that a generation before us planted, or, you know, workers in the field. You know, we don't know what God's plan on this is. But if God shows up, then God's plan will be fulfilled. And that's what we're here for. And, you know, I know a lot of people, you know, know what we're doing, and we got a lot of people. We got people all over the country praying for us, and we got people believing for us. And, you know, you're who I'm making this video for, to tell you that something's happening, something's going on, God's doing something, and I don't know what. And people ask you, what's your vision? I'm like, you know, I almost don't even want to say anything, because I don't want to paint a picture that's not mine to paint. You know, I want God to paint this picture and show you what the vision for here is. And, you know, I realize that, you know, it's hard for people to get behind you if they can't, you know. My deal is that if you want to do something, ask God, and God will tell you what to do. And if you, you know, you know, the Bible even talks about sometimes we don't even know how to pray, and the Holy Spirit will pray for us. So, you know, I'm not trying to define all this. I'm not trying to put it into terms that are marketable, or you know, hey, we can send out this great letter that you know, I'm telling you now what's going on and what's doing, and what we're doing. And you know, for all of our, there's been a lot of people supporting us that just haven't got a chance to hear this whole story yet. And so that's why I'm making this tape. And there's probably going to be a couple other parts to this, because I have more to say to you about how all this came about, and, you know, but this isn't the time for this. I kind of wanted to update you till now. But July 29th, we are having our first church service. So continue to pray for us, and continue to believe. And thank you all for your love and prayer and supports through this time, because I guarantee you we needed them all, and we felt them all. Thank you.